Based at the heart of Liverpool's city centre, the Royal Court has been a cultural hub and dynamic venue for almost 200 years. Brought to life in 1826 by circus owner John Cook, the Rose Street Theatre has showcased an eclectic array of artistic offerings over the years. The theatre was a popular choice for world-class opera and Shakespeare plays in its early years. This was followed by its rise to fame as the epicentre of Liverpool's infamous pop scene in the 80s and 90s. Here are a few memories from those who have been touched by and been part of creating its illustrious history.
It's one of the heart of the city, this place. To me, it's an old friend.
It really is a people's theatre.
It's not just an old building.
It's got a special place in people's hearts. It's had some tough periods in the recent past.
The atmosphere here then when we worked there, I would have worked there for nothing.
It was a very exciting place to play.
The atmosphere was just incredible.
You don't want to go anywhere else. This is it. Why go anywhere else?
My first memories of the theatre was doing the lift as a young lad, waiting for Margaret Lockwood to come off, take her up to room, floor number 1, and wait for her to come back down after a quick change. And that was the first memory of getting a 10-shilling note off Margaret Lockwood, which I've still got today.
I remember seeing Where the Rainbow Ends and coming to this theatre in 1942 or 3 and with the school. And I've always remembered it because it was the first big theatre I'd been to.
Well, my first memory of coming to the Royal Court was when I was working next door at the Liverpool Playhouse, because the Playhouse was my first theatre job. So we used to come to the matinees and see all these fantastic things, which, we'd never seen in London. And one of the very first things was Alistair Sim as Prospero in The Tempest. I think it might be the first time I ever came here. And through the years, I came many times. But that was how we first got hooked on it, because we were doing rep, really. Well, it was 3 weekly rep, but this seemed very posh, with all these very famous actors.
I got a call from an uncle of mine who was a milkman who worked here, Red Shaw, and he said they were looking for stage-hands. And I started here at the age of 18. I was a flyman, trainee flyman, gopher tea for the Tiller girls, get locked in the dressing room with the Tiller girls and covered in perfume, which as a young lad of 18 was brilliant.
My first memory of the Royal Court Theatre was Morecambe and Wise in Panto, very, very many years ago.
I was watching the crowd laughing uproariously. I was only a kid, and it's kind of cemented my desire to be in this business.
I was up in the top of the top balcony. I think I might have only been 1960 or 61, but it was Christmas pantomime with Bruce Forsyth.
This was always my favourite theatre. It just had a real magical buzz about it, so that when I came back to work here, it was truly amazing. And then, as I got older, came to the theatre regularly and actually came to see Vivian Leigh in La Contessa, a fabulous actress.
I remember Vivian Leigh especially. I think she was doing in the show play about Cleopatra, and her entrance on the stage, she was wrapped up in a rug, and of course the husband was Caesar, and they unrolled her at his feet.
It was beautiful, the beautiful turquoise curtains, gorgeous curtains with these gold tassels on, and all the theatre was beautifully, it was turquoise and golds and all that sort of thing, and lovely dressing rooms, and it was just magical.
Back in the day when they did the 1 week touring of Shakespeare and the classics and comedies and musicals, that's when people went to the theatre.
The Royal Court was a place where the tours came to. So this was a place, really, this building has always been about people. All the big West End stars, all the big theatre stars in England, and quite a few Americans, appeared at the Royal Court. So for a lot of people in Liverpool, for nearly a century, this theatre is associated with famous actors and great actors. There was practically no famous actor in the 20th century who didn't appear at this theatre at some point. I think my most vivid memory, and it's 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago, was Dorothy Tooting in The Devils. But so that was overwhelming anyway. But it started a bit late. And of course, because we had to get next door back to the playhouse, we were quite worried it started a bit late. But it transpired it started a bit late because Dottie Tootin, I think, had forgotten there was a matinee. So she wasn't there. So eventually, you know, the show eventually started, and she came on in the first scene, and she had no makeup on. And then in the second scene, after she'd been off, she had a bit more makeup on. And the third scene, and by the interval, she was fully made up. And so as young actors, we were very aware of this. Probably the audience wasn't. But she was playing this nun, you know, in sort of 16th century France. And she had a wristwatch on, because in the middle of getting right in this so my most vivid memory is Dorothy Tootin as a nun with a wristwatch. And I did work with her some years later, and I never plucked up the courage to tell her that I'd seen her with her watch on at the Royal Court.
The place was a happy place to work. The lads that we worked with were great. We had a good time. We had to go out on a Friday night for a meal or, you know, do things together. It was like a family.
Some people would say there's no such thing as the good old days, but when we worked there, it was the good old days in the theatre.
It certainly was.
Extra police will be on duty in Liverpool tonight when former Beatle Paul McCartney takes the stage at the Royal Court Theatre. Paul and his band Wings are appearing in his native city to fulfil a promise he made to launch his new British tour on Merseyside.
The Royal Court was mostly a rock venue. There was never any plays or theatre. It was never seen as a theatre. It was more as a venue for music. And it was a mixed bag. It was from student bands to heavy metal bands, American bands. But it was an exciting place to be.
Everyone talks about Eric's as the place, you know, where they went, and I can remember going to the matinees at Eric's. But for me, some of the most important bands was really coming to the Royal Court.
It was always the place in Liverpool when you formed a band that you wanted to play. It was always that I've got to play the Royal Court and see your name on the big Dayglow poster outside.
Probably my favourite, really, is the time we came, I think 86, 87, when we came with the Spectacular Spin and Songbook. The game show wheel, and had people come out of the audience and spin it and play, and we played what came up.
This is totally unrehearsed.
At one point we had Ferry Across the Mersey on there, and I thought, well, maybe it'll come up, and then it did. And I didn't have to sing it after a verse, the whole balcony sang it, so you can't do better than that, really.
As a music lover, you never forget your first gig. The emotions that I felt coming to the Royal Court that night, I was like hooked immediately.
Some of the earliest bands that I can remember were bands like there's from Meatloaf, there's Oasis, the Beastie Boys.
I saw the Clash here, I saw the Jam here.
From Teardrop Explodes, Kraftwerk, I saw Robbie Williams here.
The gigs just kept on coming, so Blair the following year.
Paul McCartney, Wings.
If you want to come to a gig, you went to the Royal Court, and it was exciting about being old enough to go to your first gig at the Royal Court.
Pretty much any time there's a band playing here, we used to come down, we used to gig in on the guest list. Simon Geddes would let us in, and you know, it was part of our life.
Me and my best mate, we weren't old enough to do this, but we slept out all night to queue for tickets in 1979, I think it was, and it was a Saturday night. And the queue stretched all the way. You used to be able to get under the underpass here, all the way around Liverpool. And at 4 a.m, we go and look how big the queue was. And obviously all the drunks were coming out the bars and clubs then, and they added to the queue. And it was amazing. When the doors actually opened to sell a ticket in the morning on the Sunday morning, there was just mayhem. So it was every man for himself.
It's great, you know. Me and my brother have been fans for ages, you know.
Beers are queued up 26 hours to come and watch it. Yeah.
26 hours?
Yeah. We got down there about 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday and got our tickets about 11:45.
Yeah, it just seemed to be gig after gig, and it was all at the Royal Court.
The venue as I remember it, was very run down. Dark blue and gold everywhere, just very tatty.
And it was much more of a spit and sawdust rock and roll venue with a sloped floor.
The wallpaper was flaking. It was like an oversized ashtray.
The atmosphere was just incredible, but I still remember it then, like thinking, I'm gonna have to burn these shoes when I leave, because the floor was like really sticky floor, and there was a thick billowing clouds of smoke everywhere, and like they sold cans of Red Stripe behind the bar for £1.
And it smelt of drink and cigarettes, just very tatty.
You saw the breath coming out of people's mouths because the central heating wasn't working.
I can still remember like the smells and the sort of, it was like pure decadence and real sort of debauchery. It was like this grandiose setting.
It was an amazing place to watch live rock and roll music, you know, it really got to the grit of it all.
My first gig at the Royal Court, you have to go sort of like back to the early 90s. I remember we had tickets to go and see a concert, and a few weeks earlier, I think 3 of my mates had been to the Royal Court and they'd seen a heavy metal band, Pantera, and they came home with all these tales about how rough and like how messy it was, and the singer had climbed up to the balcony, thrown himself into the crowd, and I was like, phew. And my mum overheard all this. She was like, you're not going to this place. Because bear in mind, I was like 14. And I think I got these new pair of glasses. And like, this is like the early 90s, and they were like this big. And I looked like a right whopper and everything. And she's like, your new glasses, they're going to get battered. And so I was like, okay. So we came up with this like solution, which was to tie some shoelaces around the arms so they wouldn't fall off and get broken. And I'm like already thinking, what a joke this is. And the only shoelaces that were to hand were these pair of Dayglow green shoelaces. So I'm there with these bad glasses on already, and then a pair of shoelaces hanging off the end of them. It was dirty, smelly, but at the same time it felt right. It really sort of like, you felt at home, and it felt like you were entering into something that was genuinely like rock and roll. And the first gig that I saw here was a Northern Ireland punk band called Therapy. And I remember they came on, and I'm there with me like shoelaces round my glasses, and it was all like red lit, sort of dark maroon, and then they just went into these crunching power chords. The lights went up and everything, and everyone, it was just pure bedlam. And it was scary, but at the same time pure exhilarating, and like I could feel my glasses going everywhere, my heart going everywhere. It was just bedlam, and like for 90 minutes it was all out, like sheer terror but sheer enjoyment at the same time. And I was like, wow, this is exactly where I want to be all the time.
Beastie Boy rock star Adam Horovitch has arrived in Liverpool under police escort after last night's riot at the American group's concert in the city.
It was the first weekend after the football season had finished. The Beastie Boys had played Monterey Pop the week before and had a lot of bad press. And the Liverpool music press done a report in the Echo saying that they should have been banned. So the tension in the crowd that night was mixed. And it was all a bit of a do about nothing until the band came on stage. Never even played one song. We got about 3 minutes into a track, and it was just a hail of cans and bottles and everything thrown at the stage.
A massive brawl of kind of scousers in the room, and it was at a time when the Beastie Boys were kind of flexing their muscles and stuff, saying you know, that they were kind of fairly tough Jewish boys from Brooklyn really, and the scousers said, well, we need to show these boys a thing or two.
And then the band reacted by hitting one of the cans or back out into the audience, which then started a full-scale riot.
It was a huge riot in the place, and people were kind of hanging off the chandeliers that I don't think are there anymore behind me.
I remember a lot of the lads who worked on the security at the time had motorbikes, and he brought the bikes in and started to corral the people out in the main circle down at the front of the stage. Brought the bikes in and started riding the bikes around to get the people out who were rioting and throwing seats, ripping seats up. Doorman came in from the club and helped us. When the police turned up, they ran in and then ran back out.
I don't know why the Royal Court had got into the state it was in.
My son was a drummer, and they were having a drum marathon here. And he said, "Why don't you pop along, Mum?" So I did. I thought it'd be nice to come in to see the theatre again after a while. And I could have cried because all the seats had gone. It was all painted black. And I thought, what have they done to this beautiful theatre? It just seemed criminal.
When the groups were here, the atmosphere was totally different, and it had lost something, you know. It wasn't very nice doing the groups. I mean, like the Schwaddy Waddy and groups like that. They didn't know when to get off stage, and they had to bring the Iron Curtain in some nights to get them off because they'd gone over time, and the theatre would be shut down if they lost their licence.
Yeah.
But they never took any notice. It wasn't theatre, it was...
When they started, the groups coming in and all that, that was the downfall of the theatre, see, because they wrecked the theatre because they took all the seats out to get more people in. So that was the start of the theatre.
That's when we lost the Royal Course, isn't it?
Falling apart then because...
Standing room only.
Yeah, it was never the same.
No, it was sad to see, to be honest with you.
After decades of vibrating walls, tapping toes and buzzing eardrums, the court seemed to lose its mojo, and the world of pop moved on and into stadium-sized venues. The future of the Royal Court looked bleak, and there was even talk of the theatre being sold off to a large supermarket chain. Thankfully, its fate took a different turn.
The Royal Court looked absolutely terrible before. It always looked closed during the day. The shutters were down. We had to put banners on the building because we didn't really have any poster sites or anything. All the kind of public spaces, if you like, had been really neglected.
When you're outside, when you're getting off the bus, you looked and all you could see were these big heavy metal grills on the doors and the big metal shutters that were down a lot of the time. And people either didn't know we were open, or if they thought we were open, they looked at it and thought, well, I'm not going in there.
We came to do Evita and My Fair Lady. And when we tried to sell tickets for My Fair Lady, people said, "Oh, I love that show, it's my favourite, oh yes, we want to come." But in actual fact, we lost money because the state of the theatre, people wouldn't come.
I came to a show here one time, George Hamilton IV, and there were 12 people here. 12. And you think, what is going on? And yet he went ahead and did the show, and I thought, fantastic. And yeah, you looked around the theatre thinking, why has it gone this way? The world economy, the finances, whatever. People weren't investing in theatre.
One of my problems is I'm very optimistic, so I didn't see any problems. I just saw a great building that wasn't being used, and I thought, we'll make that work. And at the time, I'd run the Everyman in Liverpool. I was then running a comedy club. So I thought we could bring the comedy club in here, which we did for a year. But the plan was always to bring theatre back to the Royal Court.
We had sort of grown Rawhide Comedy Club into the UK's biggest comedy club. But I think what that did was bring an audience out into the city centre, into venues like the Royal Court. And I suppose we sensed, having done Rawhide for 15 years, that they actually wanted something else and would come to see other things. And that's exactly what happened when we put on Brick Up the Mersey Tunnels for the first time.
I thought Brick Up would be a success. We can never guarantee that, but it's a great title. We'd done a couple of shows here previously. Well, I had, even when I didn't work here. There was a show called Night Collar and then Slappers and Slapheads. Both had got decent audiences. So we knew there was an audience in Liverpool that wasn't being catered for by the other theatres, which is then it was a primarily working class audience that wanted to be entertained.
The building for 25 years was a rock venue. So the audience that were coming here are not a theatre audience. The audience that were coming to the comedy shows, not really a theatre audience. You get some who might go and see stuff, but so we were in the weird position of trying to sell plays to an audience that don't like plays.
We opened that weekend, and this was at the time when the bank had closed us down, and it was an exciting moment, but at the same time it was, oh my God, we might be closed though next week, and we needed the show to be a success. So on the Friday we opened, and it was standing ovation, 1,000 people. Same on Saturday. press night was the following Tuesday, Wednesday, and we're thinking, can we get to press night? And on Monday, there's a queue of 19 people at box office at 10 o'clock, which was word of mouth working. I get emotional. On the Friday, we couldn't pay the wages, and I had to pay people on the Saturday out of the box office money that we got on the Friday. And then to have that queue on Monday just turned it all around. But if that hadn't have happened on the Monday, none of this would have happened.
And word went around like that, because Breakup is such a funny show. So the first thing that happened was all the postcodes, first of all, were L postcodes, Liverpool, 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 Liverpool. Then you get into week 2, and suddenly all the CH postcodes start coming over, because they want to know what they were talking about. But we couldn't deal with the number of people trying to book, because we had 2 computers and 1 phone in the box office. And we had queues out the door down to St John's. I was sending people down to Curry's in town to buy laptops and phones and getting them plugged into anywhere in the building. Anywhere in the building I could get an internet connection and a phone line. I had a member of box office staff was redirecting phone lines all around the building just to deal with the demand for that.
The Royal Court was obviously a building that I thought was important to keep alive in the city and for the city.
It was a great time. It was a difficult time, but it was a great time to start doing theatre at the Royal Court again.
They found a niche of this slapstick stroke, bawdy, very funny, old-fashioned comedy put into a play. They have now branded themselves and put this amazing mark in the city where you can have a wonderful meal, you can see the acts afterwards and the actors, you can come and enjoy a show and laugh and laugh and laugh.
After much hard work and support from building owners Liverpool City Council, the newly formed charity, the Royal Court Trust, persuaded the Heritage Lottery Fund to support the first phase of the Trust's £10 million vision for the restoration of the theatre. The rest, as they say, is history.
It's kind of always been an amphitheatre of arts. It does all different things. It's done music, it's done comedy, it's done theatre very well. It does theatre again.
The history of now, of how Kevin and Gillian have managed to rescue it, started off with a bit of comedy and have turned it into this very much people's theatre, which is really very much a theatre for Liverpool and for Liverpudlians to come to.
It was about finding a really good architect's practice to work with, who understood that issue and could come up with really creative ideas.
Most theatres, they want to fill them with lots of people if they can, and they don't necessarily know how to go about it. And the Royal Court does seem to know that.
We suddenly had this idea that we could put a pavilion at the front, that would be a new front door, and that would make the public space work better. And then inside, literally on the first drawings, we said, what if we peel away the plasterwork? Isn't there nice bricks there? And we found there were. So this idea of all of this rawness was important.
The Royal Court has been important for Liverpool for a long, long time, and people feel the Royal Court is their theatre.
I think that we were as successful as we were because of the expertise of Jill and the love that the audience have for this theatre. It's a vibrant on stage and distinguished in the architecture.
It looks really stylish and classy now, and it's just somewhere nice to come to now.
We're not hanging on to the past. That's what's been very clever about the renovation now, is to take the theatre forward, not just to hang on to it as it was.
And I've seen it in obviously, when it was a proper theatre, and all sorts of things came through here before they started having live music here, when it was only a theatre, and now it's a theatre again, which is great, so it's gone round in a circle.
It's a magnificent recreation of what it was in its heyday.
Showing what the old building is with the new insertions, I think will be a massive change.
I love that it's got back to the brick. I love that we've got back to the heritage of this theatre.
I feel like I've reinvented one of the most important buildings in Liverpool.
The way that it's been adapted to the 21st century is really the most outstanding thing about it, because now it hasn't just got a past, it's got a future.